The gossip started before the ink dried. By the time Clara Whitmore signed the papers in the county office, 3 people had already heard she was buying the old Haskins tract west of town. By sunset, half of Harper County knew. By morning, everyone had an opinion. Widow lost her senses. That ground won't grow weeds. She paid real money for sand and wind. Clara heard none of it directly. Kansas towns preferred cruelty delivered secondhand. It saved people from meeting courage. She stepped out of the courthouse carrying a manila folder, chin level, black gloves folded in one hand. At 48, she still moved with the quiet posture of someone who had spent years beside a respected man and now had to walk without him. Her husband, Thomas Whitmore, had died 18 months earlier when a grain truck tire blew on Highway 160. He left insurance money. He did not leave instructions for loneliness. Most assumed she would sell the house, move closer to Wichita, perhaps live near her sister. Instead, Clara bought 180 acres everyone else had spent 20 years avoiding. The Haskins tract lay flat and open beneath a hard western sky. The soil was pale in places, crusted in others, scarred by old erosion channels and abandoned attempts at farming. Wind moved across it without asking permission. Locals called it cursed land. Farmers called it poorer things. Clara called it available. Mark Delaney, who ran the feed store, stopped her truck at the edge of town that afternoon. "Heard you bought Haskins." "I did." Mark rested an elbow in the window. "Why?" "It was for sale." That's not an answer. It was enough of one to sign papers. He looked at her for a moment, trying to decide if she was joking. "You know nobody could make that place pay." Clara glanced west where the horizon shimmered. Then it should be inexpensive to learn why. She drove on before he could reply. The house on the tract was gone except for foundation stones. A collapsed shed leaned into itself near a dry stock tank. Fencing sagged in long, defeated lines. But Clara noticed what others had stopped seeing. The land rolled slightly rather than lying dead flat. There were 2 shallow draws where rain once traveled. Native grasses still held in corners never fully plowed. And beneath a crust of neglect, soil remained. She parked near the old windmill and stood in the silence. No tractors, no voices, only wind. People mistook silence for emptiness. Thomas never had. That first week, she did nothing dramatic. She walked, morning and evening, boots gathering dust, notebook in hand. She mapped slope, runoff scars, hardpan patches, volunteer grasses, old fence lines, and where dew lingered longest after sunrise. She pushed a shovel into 20 different spots. Some stopped shallow. Some went deeper than expected. Patterns mattered more than first impressions. At church Sunday, women spoke kindly to her face and differently once she passed. Poor Clara. Grief does strange things. Buying bad land was apparently one of them. Clara placed a casserole dish on the fellowship table and smiled at everyone exactly the same. By October, she hired a dozer operator. That's when laughter became entertainment. Men parked pickups along the road to watch. The dozer cut shallow contour berms across slopes where water had always run straight off. It cleaned erosion channels into catch basins. It reopened the old stock tank deeper and wider. Brush piles disappeared. Rock lines became barriers to slow runoff. Mark Delaney came out with coffee in a thermos. "You planning to farm or build a golf course?" "Neither." "What then?" "Rain." He handed her the cup because curiosity had outrun mockery. Winter came dry and cold. Clara used the months to string new fencing, repair gates, and seed test strips of hardy cover crops no one around Harper County bothered with. Rye, daikon radish, clover, rabbit feed, someone called from a passing truck. Maybe, but roots broke soil cheaper than steel. In spring, she leased 20 goats. That nearly broke the town. Widow buys bad land, then rents goats. The story spread to 2 neighboring counties. The goats cleared brush and gullies machinery hated. Their manure fed poor patches. They cost less than diesel and complained less than hired men. Clara considered that efficient. By summer, green stripes appeared where bare soil had dominated. The contour lines held rainfall from 2 hard storms. Water that once ran into the road now soaked into ground. The stock tank filled halfway. Wild quail returned to the north grass corner. Children noticed before adults did. A boy named Eli bicycled out one evening and stood by the gate. "Mr. Delaney says you're crazy." "Does he?" "Yes, ma'am." "What do you think?" He looked over the field where goats moved like scattered stones through brush. I think it's less ugly now. That's useful honesty. She paid him $2 to help reset a fence post. By year 2, Clara planted Milo on the better sections and left weaker acres in improving cover. Neighbors predicted failure confidently. Then a late dry spell hit the county. Conventional fields burned pale. Clara's contour-held moisture kept her Milo standing longer than expected. Not perfect. Standing. That difference paid bills. Mark Delaney arrived with less swagger than before. Heard you sold grain. A little. From Haskins' land. Same land. He removed his cap and scratched his head. Wouldn't have guessed. That's becoming common. He laughed despite himself. The county fair that fall featured many things. Prize hogs, seed boots, pie judging, and quiet conversations about Clara Whitmore. Some still said luck. Some said government grant, though none existed. Some said widow stubbornness, which was closest to truth. Then in the third spring, a black SUV rolled onto the track. A man in pressed jeans and expensive boots stepped out carrying rolled maps. Well Company logo on the door. He smiled the smile of someone arriving late to value. Mrs. Whitmore? Yes. I represent Prairie Ridge Energy. We like to discuss leasing rights under your property. Clara looked past him to the recovering land, glowing green after rain. Then back to the man. Interesting, she said. Why's that? Because 3 years ago, Clara replied. You wouldn't have stopped your car here. The man introduced himself as Trevor Kane. Land acquisitions for Prairie Ridge Energy. Clean truck. Clean boots. Clean confidence. He unrolled maps across the hood of his SUV as if the wind and dust were inconveniences created for lesser people. There's a producing formation running beneath sections west of here, he said. Recent data suggests your tract may sit over a valuable extension. Clara looked at the papers without touching them. 3 years earlier, men like him would have called the Haskins tract a mistake. Now they called it strategic. And what do you want? She asked. A lease option. Surface access, terms negotiable. Competitive signing bonus. He named a number. It was enough to make most people say yes too quickly. Clara did not. She asked about road placement, water use, setback distances, soil remediation, topsoil separation, noise limits, pipeline easements. Trevor blinked more often as the questions continued. You've done this before? No, Clara said. I've just learned to read what people overlook. He left with no signature. By supper, Harper County knew an oil company had visited her land. By breakfast, the story had improved itself. They found oil. She's selling out. She'll be rich by Friday. Mark Delaney arrived before noon carrying feed sacks he didn't need delivered. So what? You leasing? Are you always this direct when uninformed? Only with friends. Clara considered that. We're not friends. Neighbors then. Temporary category. Mark laughed. You really enjoy making people work for answers. I enjoy making people earn curiosity. She eventually signed a lease, but not the one Trevor first offered. Months of negotiation followed. Prairie Ridge agreed to directional drilling from the north edge rather than through the center fields. Roads had to follow existing contour lanes. Topsoil segregation and reclamation bonds were mandatory. Water trucks paid road maintenance. Surface damages were indexed annually. Grazing and cropping interruptions compensated separately, and one clause no one expected. A percentage of signing bonus would fund local soil conservation education through the county extension office. Trevor objected. Clara insisted. He signed. The first payment alone cleared the remaining mortgage on her townhouse, upgraded fencing, and built proper water lines across the tract. But money wasn't the real turning point. Validation was. People who laughed at worthless land suddenly drove slower when passing it. The first well pad went in quietly on the far north edge, barely visible from the road. The rest of the acreage kept improving. Year 4 brought heavier rains than normal. Fields around the county washed in places where straight row habits still sent water downhill fast. Clara's contour berms held. Catch basins filled and drained gradually. Her stock tank overflowed for the first time anyone remembered. Native grass strips stayed rooted. Even those who disliked admitting it admitted something. The widow knew what she was doing. By year 5, she expanded into cattle. Not many. 27 black Angus heifers rotated through improved pasture sections restored from former wasteland. Goats still worked rough gullies seasonally. Milo rotated with forage sorghum and cover crops. The land now produced in layers. Grain, grass, grazing, lease income. Wildlife habitat payments on corners too fragile to till. Multiple streams from acres once mocked as useless. Eli, the boy who had once called it less ugly, was 15 now and worked summers for her. He drove fence posts straighter than most grown men and asked smarter questions than they did too. One July evening, he stood beside Clara, overlooking the west pasture. "Why didn't you sell when they left?" "No one offered then. I mean after the oil money." She watched cattle move through golden light. "Because the point was never to escape the land." "What was the point?" "To prove they were lazy with their judgment." He thought about that a while. Did it work? Clara smiled faintly. "Look around. The county fair looked different now." Extension agents invited Clara to speak on soil recovery. Farmers asked about cover crops with the same mouths that once mocked radishes. Bankers asked if she'd consider expanding. A magazine photographer asked her to stand in a wheat field holding a shovel. She declined the shovel. Mark Delaney became her loudest public supporter. Privately, he admitted why. "I mock you so hard I need this redemption arc." She almost liked him by then. Almost. Then came the drought. Year 7. Rain vanished by June. Wind arrived daily. Pastures browned across Harper County. Dryland yields collapsed in fields that had never rebuilt organic matter or infiltration. Clara's place suffered too, but slower. Her soil held moisture longer. Mulched strips reduced evaporation. Rooted cover history mattered now in ways invisible during wet years. She destocked early, sold strategically, and protected grass recovery. Milo still made a crop where neighbors dissed failure under. That autumn, land values jumped around her tract after energy royalties were confirmed in adjacent sections. 2 separate buyers approached. Then 3. Then a regional investment group came in person. They offered enough money to retire comfortably twice. The lead buyer stood by the gate and gestured broadly. "Mrs. Whitmore, this is one of the most remarkable turnarounds in the county. We'd like to purchase the full 180 acres. Clara asked the price. He told her, then added, "We're prepared to move quickly." She nodded politely. "I'm not." He looked confused. "You don't want to sell?" "I didn't buy it to resell once others learned to see." Word spread faster than any previous rumor. She turned them down. All of them. By year 10, no one called it the Haskins Tract anymore. It was Whitmore land. Children on school tours learned about contour water capture there. Ranchers studied her rotational grazing. Farmers copied strips of clover and rye across the county. Some even leased goats, though none admitted where the idea came from. One evening, Clara stood beside the restored stock tank, now ringed with reeds and ducks, watching sunset spill across 180 green, productive acres. Mark pulled up in his old truck. "They're still trying to buy it," he said. "I know. You ever tempted?" "Sometimes." He raised an eyebrow. "Then why not?" Clara looked over the land once dismissed as barren waste. "Because they only want it now that it's beautiful." Mark nodded slowly. "And I wanted it when it wasn't." Wind moved through the grass. Water shimmered gold. Far off, cattle drifted toward evening shade. They had laughed at the widow who bought 180 acres of useless Kansas land. And 10 years later, they were still trying to buy the proof they were wrong.